Welcome to the Paramedic AF Show with your hosts, Dan and Michelle. We hope you've come prepared to be challenged, offended, and encouraged. We are here to create a better future for the entire EMS industry. We have changed or omitted names of individuals in order to protect the innocent, the guilty, and the incompetent. We believe that knowledge fuels power, ignorance is not bliss, and nothing will change until we abandon the status quo. This is our design. Welcome to the show.
And welcome back to the second full episode of the Paramedic AF Show. This is Dan and Michelle. Very excited to be back with you guys. We're very excited about the positive response we've gotten so far from the show, and we hope to continue to deliver to you guys. We're very excited about what we have today. Michelle, you want to go ahead and get us introduced today?
Sure. As Daniel said, we are super excited about the response we got. I did have just one quick little announcement. So from the initial podcast, we actually had some response from some people that are not in EMS, which is actually super exciting, that are asking for a little bit more information. So we kind of talked, and I just wanted to throw out there that at some point, periodically, not necessarily like monthly or anything like that, we will be putting out podcasts that are more specific to the general public that, you know, aren't in public service or aren't in EMS, to explain a little bit more about us and what we do, because we would love to add community outreach and everything else that goes along with that to strengthen the bonds amongst us, other services, other public service agencies, and the general public. Please, if you have any questions, send them to us, because we would love to do a Q&A episode every now and then. Getting into what we're discussing today, clinical discipline, one of the core values that we have. Today we're going to be talking about the emotions of the job, as well as continuing education and treatment. I know this is a topic that is talked about all the time in all of our fields. You know, we all have a required in-service training / continuing education, but there are certain aspects of this that are rarely, if ever, discussed, and that is something that we want to focus on today.
I just wanted to point out, when you were talking about strengthening bonds, it sounded like you said strengthening bongs.
I mean,
I just had to laugh. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to throw us off. I just thought that was kind of funny.
I mean, if we're being honest with my mixed accent, it's very possible that's how it came out.
Yes, that's fine. So this is a core value that we actually struggled with a little bit, because it was something related to clinical care, but we didn't just want it to be, we didn't want it to just be clinical excellence, because there's more to this. And so we wrestled with it for a little bit, and finally I was like, all right, this makes sense. Clinical discipline, but we're going to need to explain it a little bit. So in summary, clinical discipline is maintaining a confident and professional manner while demonstrating respect and concern, because it is important to gain the patient's trust and achieve control over the scene. So, what is clinical discipline?
Well, first, I would like to break down the word a little bit, and I do apologize, it's going to be a little bit of education along with it, but the root word of discipline is disciple, which comes from the Latin word discipulus, meaning... Very good job. I thought I was going to mess up that word. Discipulus, meaning student. Most people believe a disciple is a follower, mostly because of the religious context. But in reality, it means student, as in someone who studies.
So for our core value interpretation of that, we've kind of got two definitions. There's a very strict definition. It's the ability to be in charge of your emotions during the clinical decision-making process. But more broadly speaking, we look at it as bringing emotional regulation to bear in all aspects of your job as a provider. Whether it's prescribed conduct, patterns of behavior, ultimately it boils down to exercising self-control. Because if you can't maintain your own emotional well-being on a call, you're not going to be able to maintain control of the scene, which as a provider, that's ultimately what your first responsibility is. The first priority of your patient care is taking control of the scene and taking control of that care. So what does this look like in actual application? To sum it up yet another way, you run the call doesn't run you. And I've seen this so many times over the years, and I had to learn this lesson too, because, again, very early on in my career, it was very easy to get caught up in the emotions of the call and the panic on the patient's faces and the family members yelling at you, and everybody the energy levels would just escalate so quickly. And I had to learn that you regulate your emotions to do what is best for the patient, family and friends at scene, and other providers and responders. Because at the end of the day, as we all love to say, it's not your emergency. There was one time years ago, I was a brand new EMT. I had a absolute shit show of a wreck. Literally, we were the first of 3 or 4 trucks that got sent. I ended up on another truck with another medic to actually transport patients in, because my partner got stuck on scene flying a patient out, and then he got tossed to another truck. It was an absolute clusterfuck. Everybody got to the hospital fine. Everybody was treated appropriately. But I was like, what the hell just happened? And, I'm running around the bay, putting stuff away, trying to get cleaned up, figure out who was where. And one of the medics kind of pulled me aside and said, bro, slow down. This is not your emergency. Remember, it is your job to be the calm in the storm. It is not your job to make the storm worse. And that resonated with me, and it's something I've carried with me for a long time. But I think it's something that we don't teach enough. Some people learn it from experience, but we don't really systematize this. We don't really explain why this is important.
Well, and if you don't have control of your emotion, like let's say you're the provider, whether it's paramedic or EMT, in the back of the truck running code for whatever the problem is. If you're worked up and you're the more senior person, etc., your partner is going to feed off of that energy. Mm-hmm. And then it starts playing into safety as well, because if they're all jacked up on adrenaline and anxiety and getting worked up, then they're going to start driving more recklessly, not on purpose, not to cause harm, but just you have to learn to control that anxiety and that adrenaline. As providers, you get called out, whether it's a BLS or ALS truck, to, a cardiac arrest. I know we keep using that as an example, but it's a good one. That's a high stress situation that not everybody gets to run all the time. But just any kind of call, whether you have fire and or law enforcement, depending on cert levels and experience levels, you show up and they're like, cool, EMS is here. This is their job. And you're all worked up. If all these people are looking at you like, hey, these are supposed to be the guys to deal with this, and you're freaking out, it's going to make everybody else freak out. So then you lose control of the scene, and the patient is going to, feel the anxiety. You have to set the tone for the entire thing. And that is a lot of that's a lot of responsibility.
It is, because, on top of managing the high acuity nature of the call, you have to control your speech. You have to control your pitch. You have to control your body. You have to manage the emotions of others on the scene. Because like you said, everyone's going to feed off of your energy. And so you have to decide, am I going to come in and am I going to be the anchor for everyone? Am I going to be the one who is the energy absorber? Not absorber like, I'm going to internalize it and, stress out over it. But when you can just take everything that everyone's throwing at you and say, okay, deep breath, let's figure this out. Someone comes in at you and they're all worked up, to be able to look at them and say, hey, what's going on? Just that tone, controlling your pitch, not only is it going to help you control everybody's emotions at scene, but it's going to help you control yourself. You slow your breathing down. Think about it in those terms of you got to control your mind through controlling your body. And when you can control yourself, when you're not getting excited, you're going to be able to more effectively manage everybody else's emotions as well. And what the priority of this boils down to is you need to do what's right for the patient, not what is convenient for you personally or what stress is telling you to do. Because you walk in the door and someone says, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. Okay, cool. You personally take a deep breath, assess them properly, act quickly. If they need actual intervention, cool. but they might just be having a panic attack. They might just feel like they can't breathe, but they actually are and they're okay. But that's just one emotion that you're regulating, because a lot of people get stressed out by high acuity calls. Another thing is, and this is something that we're all more guilty of, is when we're frustrated. When we don't want to deal with what we perceive, at least, as bullshit, drama, whatever the case may be. You're getting called out at 2 a.m. for toe pain that's been going on for a week. All right. Deep down, your response is, really, man? Really? Why am I here? But, and I'm not saying we have to coddle people. I actually believe the firm opposite. We should educate patients. But, let's say, you look at a patient, they say their chest is tight, whatever. It's easy for us to write it off. And maybe there's some times where it is appropriate. But your decision making should be driven by what's clinically appropriate for the patient. So you know what? Even if you think it's bullshit, you don't want to run the call, suck it up and put the 12 lead on. We've all dealt with this, and I hate it. I'm just going to, little side note here, I hate when people go and they just mash on someone's sternum and be like, does that hurt? Yeah. Oh, well, it's not cardiac. Bull fucking shit. If I push on your sternum right now, like if I really put my knuckles to it, it's going to fucking hurt. Period. That's not good medicine. That's lazy care. That's not doing what's right. You're giving into the emotion of being frustrated and annoyed. And it's not appropriate. It's not professional. And it's the kind of shit that needs to stop. Because your emotions are going to get in the way of you providing effective care. Even if the patient's not having an emergency, even if they're totally fucking fine, if you develop that reputation for being the one who's easily irritable, and again, I've been there, I have done that, I've had to grow and mature in this myself too, because yes, I have thrown tantrums on calls before. I have walked into the frequent flyer's the frequent flyer's house, and been like, what's going on? Oh, well, it's just this. Okay, cool, I'm out. Bye. My partner, you can deal with this. I'm done. And that's not appropriate. That's not professional. That was wrong. And so you just got to do the work. You have to own up, realize that you're there to do a job, suck it up and deal with it. And so anyway, there's a lot of facets to this particular topic, but that's just one thing I really wanted to harp on is, regulate your emotions, do what's right for the patient and not just what's convenient.
So going along with that, I think something important outside of just emotions, which you actually made me think of something, but I'll get to that in just a second.
Oh boy.
It's actually funny. Okay. Maybe not funny, but it's cute. The biggest thing along with emotion is keeping up with your continuing education. When you talk about discipline as a word, you have like different disciplines in medicine. You have good and bad discipline with, misbehaving children. But we're talking about the definition with how to have good clinical discipline that comes down to committing to education, continuing education in general. But with like what Daniel's talking about, you need to do appropriate assessments and give appropriate treatment. Do not take the lazy way out. With abdominal pain calls, for example, goodness, we have had so many abdominal pain calls recently. And don't get me wrong. If you have a female, for example, middle-aged female has a history of diabetes, having abdominal pain, there is a very good chance that it is a heart attack. That is, she has the neuropathy of the chest and it's referred pain of the belly. Women we're odd cookies and don't like to present medical issues appropriately for the normal signs and symptoms. But, she probably just needs to go ahead and have a 12 lead. Now, if you have a male that is having abdominal pain, palpate the belly. That should be part of your assessment. Even if nothing is yielded, it's soft, non-tender, non-distended and stuff, you still need to do a full assessment, look at the risk factors, look at comorbidities and everything else, and do appropriate assessments for appropriate treatments. There have been several times that I have heard stories from students about EMT students, EMTs who are students, like with continuing education, who are working in the field, and they'll have, a patient that has questionable symptoms, like you could argue it's BLS, but it's one of those things that if you have to think longer than like 5 seconds, if it's ALS or BLS, the patient probably needs to be ALS, because there is something that is bothering you, that it could be something more. And especially since we can't do blood work and we can't do scans and all the rest of it, we could be missing something. Don't take the lazy way out and just automatically BLS something because you don't want to chart.
And tagging along with that, something that I know we've talked about before, but I don't know why I didn't put it in the notes. That you tend to see medics that either go the load and go route or they're stay and play. And as our mutual paramedic instructor said, because we both went to the same program, just different times, he said, you got two types of medics. You got the load and go, you got the stay and play. A quality medic knows when to do both.
Yes.
And sometimes part of assessment is just stopping and listening and watching. Because it's easy if you just write off the call as, oh, this is nothing, no big deal, whatever, and you just blow through it, you can actually miss stuff. You can miss things that are critical. Even if they're not life-threatening, they're still critical for that patient. And so don't get locked into, I have to be one or the other, because I've met providers in both camps. The ones that, they're slow as molasses in January. You have to tell them, hey, this is a stroke. We need to go now. Like 10 minutes ago, we've been on scene already for too long. Let's go. And then you got other ones who literally will say like 5 words to the patient, load them up, and you were gone. And that's not appropriate either. So there's a balance of, don't be lazy. Learn which route you need to take and which route you need to do with your assessment. Sometimes you got to toss them in the truck and go.
Well, the saying that fast is slow and slow is fast. You actually made me think sometimes it is appropriate to mix the two as well.
Agreed.
So just as an example, a call I ran several months ago. I promise I'm not going to go full into detail, but I was called out for tachycardia. Get there, patient is tacking at like 160. Fire is there. They, had the patient on a 3 lead. They took a blood pressure. Blood pressure was fine. I walk into the room where I can fully see the patient's face, and it looked like her entire left side of her face was melting. She had so much sag and droop. She was completely altered. It's like, wow. I got the baseline for the patient. This was excessively abnormal, all the rest of it. It's like immediately this is a stroke with an excessively high race score. And, load her up, get her in the truck, take a BGL, everything is screaming stroke, but her heart rate didn't her heart rate didn't exactly make sense. And it looked like it was SVT. It was very regular, all the rest of it. But I put her on the 3 lead, to confirm, etc. And all of us know that, for diagnostics and everything, you really need to take a 12 lead to confirm you're not missing anything. Well, I just put her on the 3 lead, went down the stroke pathway, called a code stroke, all the rest of it. I should have, before leaving scene, yes, you want to keep your scene time to 10 minutes or less. Well, we worked so quickly with fire. It was a wonderful group of guys. And we got her in the truck and we left scene. Just for diagnostic purposes. Now, patient got, to the hospital safe and everything. But my point is, yes, you're loading and going. But taking those 2 extra seconds to take a 12 lead on scene, especially not literally 2 seconds, but taking that short amount of time to take that 12 lead would have shown me it wasn't truly SVT. Not that it necessarily, changed the pathway and everything, but it's one of those times that it is sometimes important to mix the two. Load and go, but stay just for a, second longer to get, a clear 12 lead.
And I think what really makes that make sense is you have to have some commitment to actually doing a good job. Mm-hmm. You have to care about doing your job effectively. There's a certain level of investment that you as a provider need to have in your job. And I'm not saying that you need to worship this job and spend all of your spare time developing it. Absolutely not. Anyone I've ever known that has done that usually has a miserable home life, or they've learned lessons later in life, and they try to pass down to us and say, hey, don't be like that. Don't do the same mistakes I did. Have a life. Have balance, some level of balance in your life. Mm-hmm. But it still requires an investment from you as a provider in doing a good job, doing right by the patient.
In general, in healthcare, clinical discipline is essential to providing the best possible care to patients. It involves a commitment to continuous improvement, a dedication to the highest standards of practice, and a willingness to go above and beyond to meet patients' needs. I do have 3 types of investments I would like to hit, but for my cute little funny thing that I was going to mention, kind of related to Daniel's conversation about the emotions. So I'm preparing for a thing, kind of school related, but Daniel has been helping me, and we were actually talking about movies. And I'm sure most of y'all have seen the movie Inside Out. And it's so funny, Daniel was talking about, it was fear. What was the other one that you said?
Fear, sadness, joy, anger.
Yes, before you had mentioned 2 of them. You said anger and something else. But yes, the 5 primary characters of Inside Out, we were talking about how if you look at what they stand for and what they mean in the movie, all 5 of those emotions, especially as new providers, all of us go through. Mm-hmm. It's a matter of, certain emotions mixing. Like, we're back to the cardiac arrest. We're a brand new provider, EMT or medic, doesn't matter. Going to our first ever, cardiac arrest that had nothing to do with ride time. Some of us may have a mix of, fear/anxiety, because it's like, holy cow, I'm actually having to do this. But also, I wouldn't necessarily say joy, but maybe confidence, something along those lines about, I was trained for this. I can do it. Let's say fire or your partner or somebody, just absolutely messed up and, threw your whole routine off, have anger. I mean, there are certain calls that will go through all 5 emotions, but it's so funny thinking about in the public service mindset. Think about the movie Inside Out.
And I don't want us to sound like we're saying you can't have emotions. We're emotional creatures. That's normal. That's natural. What we're talking about is, and this is where the discipline component of clinical discipline comes into play, it's where your emotions are not dictating what you're doing. You may be running a call where a child has been in a traumatic wreck and has an amputation. That's not cool. I don't care who you are, whether you have kids or not, however much you can compartmentalize. When you have a 2-year-old kid that has an amputation, that's going to affect you some kind of way. That's going to stress you out. That's going to make you angry, make you fearful, whatever. But it's being able to say, my emotions right here, right now, are not what's important. I need to do the right thing, exercise discipline over myself to be able to do what I need to do. And again, this cycles back to what we said. You have to have some investment in doing this job well.
So we, excuse me, I'm sorry. So we kind of have thought long and hard about different points in our career, different areas of study, different times that we can take responsibility for how we're going to move forward in the field, and also how we help each other. And we kind of came down to, there are 3 different types of investment, big events, I guess you could say, that we as clinicians need to actively participate in. There are 3 opportunities for discipline for us as individuals and as leaders, slash companies, but
There's that leadership thing again.
I know, I'm telling you, leadership and taking responsibility for and accountability for your emotions. All of these build off of each other. But these opportunities are here to support the betterment of EMS and patient care. So the three of them is your initial investment, your didactic investment, and corrective investment. Now, I'm going to kind of talk about them briefly, but quite honestly, I think this could be an entire podcast on its own. We've even talked about maybe making it part of the blog on the website. But let's start with your initial investment. When you are initially investing in your commitment and your discipline to join this field, it starts during your certification program. Obviously, it's going to start at EMT, but even, paramedic, critical care, just any kind of continuing building education for additional certifications, your study habits and how you are taught, how you commit to the job is so important. And this also includes ride times. You have to have the discipline. We keep coming back to that word.
Well, and if I can just interject here, the initial investment isn't just when you literally first start into this job. Every step you take along the way to progress from one certification to another requires that initial investment. If you're not 100% committed to making this job something, to being excellent, you're not going to survive paramedic school. You might be able to pass like on a grade level, but you're not going to make it. And you need to have that determination and commitment to say, I am going to do this. This means something to me. I am going to accomplish this and do whatever it takes to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. I mean, for example, you can have somebody that wasn't fully invested, didn't have the discipline to study, every little thing in school. They get a job, maybe they do know the protocols kind of, sort of, relatively well. But if they didn't have the discipline to study and continue learning and following through with everything, maybe they just know the protocol, but they're not going to be able to do a full, thorough assessment. If the patient is allergic to morphine, know that, fentanyl is a synthetic drug. Or, you have to have the discipline and commitment to begin with. Even if it's a stepping stone, you should be making your best effort. Sorry, I'm searching for words.
Verbal stroke.
Yes, actively. You should be using your best effort no matter what you're doing for however long. With the initial investment, we move on to your didactic investment. And there's several facets to this. I mean, you have your CEP, obviously, your continuing education. Let's say, now I'm not hating whatsoever. There are plenty of people that I have met that are career EMTs. They don't want the responsibility of going to paramedic school. There are paramedics that don't want to go to critical care, etc.
That would be me.
I'm not hating on not continuing education, but with your actual in-service training, it's keeping up with what is evidence-based medicine and appropriate. Then you also have, and I think this is super important, employee onboarding is it's a thing all on its own, because no matter where you are in your career, you could be brand new, you could be a person of 20 years, all the rest of it. You have to have the discipline and commitment to learning your new service. In general, most places have roughly the same protocols, roughly this, all that. But when you are brand new to a service, you should be having, some kind of third ride time orientation process. You should be putting in just as much effort to learn the operations, learn your coworkers, the management, supervisor, area protocols, especially if it's a service where you go from not very great 10-year-old protocols to we're going to be some of the most advanced people in the area. Employee onboarding is super important to apply the commitment and discipline. Then,
if I can just interject on that too.
Of course.
And again, this is a little more of a personal note, and something that we've all been guilty of before, but it's worth saying, when you're new somewhere, and you're going through that employee onboarding where you really should be in a posture of, hey, teach me what you have to offer. Don't be that guy who anytime you open your mouth, it's, well, at the service I worked at before, this is what we did. You know, and when I lived in this state, this is how we ran things. Nobody gives a shit. If you liked it so much at the state you came from, move back. You know, but you're here, suck it up, be an adult, and carry on. Now, it's okay to be like, hey, I'm not used to this. This is new. All I've done before has been, you know, X. But now I have to learn A, B, C, and D drugs where I only had, you know, A and B before. That's fine. Provide some context to the people that are teaching you, but don't just sit there and be like, oh yeah, I know I've got this covered, you know, well, but we did it better over here. No, that's not appropriate. Be a mature adult and get over yourself. All right, that's my note. Sorry. Carry on.
Little soapboxes here and there. You'll find that we have them periodically.
Squirrel.
Yes, rabid squirrels. Now, your seeking continuing education also follows under here. Not just, you know, your regular in-service and all the rest of it, but if you're an EMT wanting to go to paramedic school, if you're a paramedic going to CC, you know, maybe it's just at your cert level wanting instructor certifications. That still falls under your didactic investment. My previous instructors may be slightly disappointed in me, but if we're being honest, there were certain aspects in paramedic school that I felt like I understood it enough that I maybe didn't read and study as hard as I should have.
No.
No.
You
not
mean
at
you're
all.
someone who didn't read the book? Oh, no. Shocker.
But in my didactic investment in myself and the job, I am finding now, as I am wanting to get these additional certifications, that I am reading like more specific stuff, like in full, than I did as a student even. And I'm realizing I should have done that originally as well. You know, you should have full investment at your initial investment and with any continuing didactics.
And it's not just formal didactic training, but having the humility to be able to phone a friend.
Yes.
And say, hey, you know what? I'd like to act like I know what I'm doing, but right now I'm neck deep in shit. And I need some help with this. Or it can be, hey, I'm just having a complete brain fart. What the hell is the dose for this? Or, hey, I've never done this before. Is this okay, what I'm about to do? Can you sanity check me? That is, while it's informal, that is still a didactic investment that you are making in doing your job well. Instead of following your ego and saying, oh, well, I'm just going to go do this because I just think this is what I should do, and you don't have any clinical backing for it, that's going to come back and bite you in the ass. You have some humility, regulate your pride a little bit, get some advice. Hey, guess what? That's suddenly a learning opportunity, and you'll remember that call for the rest of your career.
What kind of falls under that too is also learning not to be an armchair quarterback. Because yes, there are times where it's like you'll hear about a call, you know, second hand, third hand, 50th hand, whatever, and you're like, wow, that was wrong. That was fucked up. But at the same time, there are times, kind of like with QAs, which kind of reaches into the corrective investment, but on the learning aspect, Daniel's talking about humility. This all kind of goes together, and I promise I'll finish my thought. A provider should have humility, but so should training officers. Everybody should be able to admit when they're wrong, but also learn from it. It comes back to leadership. You can lead up, you can lead down, but also how you communicate. So as another example, months ago now, I had a lady that fell, broke her femur. Long story short, she was symptomatic hypokalemic. And it was to the point she was having significant cardiac changes on the 12 lead, you know, heart rate, blood pressure, the whole shebang. And it got to a point where, you know, her QT was so long, my concern was going into torsades. So it came down to, do I treat this or do I not? But she was so symptomatic, I made the clinical judgment decision based on my initial investment in education that I needed to treat it. I treated it. We had an improvement in her vital signs. I literally watched her vital signs change. Got better. Mm-hmm. Well, the way the QAs and stuff print out, like on the 12 lead, I could see the length of the QT. I had the whole story. I also, Danny makes fun of me, chart excessively well.
Obnoxiously long narratives.
Okay, just because they're a minimum of 5 paragraphs doesn't mean it's excessive.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, so I didn't even get a QA, directly, but one of our training officers came and talked to me. He's like, hey, I don't see what you're doing. It was a broken femur. We need to talk about this. And when I was able to build, yes, a lot of the information was already in my narrative. So it's not like I left stuff out. But having a full discussion, explaining my concern if I did not treat it, in the end it was, you're right, this was a good decision. But I'm able to, and this is not tooting my horn, we should practice this as a whole, stay humble enough to not get an arrogant big head. Because I may have made a decent clinical decision there, but, I may fuck up something next week. You shouldn't get a big head because you did something right. So, I learned, maybe I should have added this to my narrative. And I wouldn't even say learn something, but, he understood better with that conversation. That is a didactic learning situation.
But this also dovetails into the third and final category of investment that we're talking about, which is
your corrective investment, which has to do with QA/QI. And depending on what happens, you may get prescribed or, given, I don't want to say forced, but, given.
In some cases, it may not be forced, but it's you can do this or you can go find another job. We've seen that plenty, so.
Yes.
Call it what you want.
But prescribed remediation or voluntary, depending on what it is. Talking about the stroke with the SVT call that I had months ago, I had a QA for it, had a call review about it, and after discussing it, they decided that I didn't need any continuing education, not even continuing education, but they decided I didn't need to go over EKGs. I learned that I should have taken the 2 seconds to take a 12 lead. But they asked me if I would like any kind of review then and there. I didn't at the time. I have, refreshed on EKGs and all the rest of it, but that was a decision on my own. The biggest thing with the QA/QI, and we hit on this briefly, I think it was briefly mentioned in leadership, having positive reinforcement is going to help, especially when you need the corrective investment. And corrective investment, kind of like manipulation, can be good and can be bad. It depends on how it is applied and also how it is communicated. Educators will fall within the didactic investment and the corrective investment because as educators, we are helping positively and I don't want to say negatively, but with remediation, helping the initial investments and continuing education.
And where this ties into discipline, to kind of bring it together a little bit, because in our heads, this tangent on investment makes sense, but maybe kind of bring it back together for you guys, because we're in the context of discipline and self-regulation and taking responsibility for your job, for your growth, for your care. The initial investment requires some discipline. You have to say, I need to level up. I need to level up and take responsibility for this. The didactic investment, you can be passively involved. You just show up, you check the boxes, whatever. Or you can say, hey, you know what? I do need to pay attention to this. This is important. I need to absorb this because at the end of the day, you can always do better.
But along with the didactic, it's not just you, it's also how you're helping the new hires. Maybe not new hires, but like students. You yourself can have the discipline to learn, but it's also the example that we're giving other providers.
Yes, there's the importance of the example that you set, but ultimately it's for your own well-being. that you're doing this. And when you look at corrective investment, we're talking about, QA, QI, remediation of all kinds. A lot of people can look at this and be like, oh, this is bullshit. Why do I have to do this? Or you can look at it as, hey, you know what? Whether or not I agree with this is an opportunity for me to demonstrate what I am capable of doing. I can demonstrate that, hey, you know what? I can take this on the chin, whether it was fair or not. And how you respond to unjust actions is a whole other topic for another day. How interacting with leadership plays into that, because that's a whole different topic. It's something I feel very passionately about. Anyone who knows me knows that that's a big deal for me. But ultimately, these 3 levels of investment, initial, didactic, and corrective, all are brought together by the concept of discipline and self-mastery. That's the priority. And then we will inevitably translate that to those around us.
And I know we've brought up a whole lot of definitions, what it looks like, all the rest of it. Why is this important?
Yes, because we can sit here and bitch and complain about a lot of things all day. And we can preach about, you need to do this, you need to do that. But why is this such a big deal? Why is this a whole ass core value? One of the 4 pillars of what our project is built on. And it boils down to, if you're not regulating your emotions, you will act impulsively, incompletely, and ultimately incompetently. Because emotions are not fact. And when it comes to clinical care, yes, you need instincts, but instincts and emotions are 2 different things. Instincts are based on experience. Emotions are, based on anything. Or not. I mean, they're just what your brain is experiencing at that moment. That's not necessarily what's going to be good for the patient. Being a good medic or good EMT is just as much about your objective clinical care as it is about your emotional fitness. And a lack of emotional regulation affects all aspects of life, not just clinical performance. But if you just are habitually demonstrating a lack of emotional regulation, it is going to impact you professionally, personally, relationships, your family life, your relationship with your children, your coworkers, all of it. And so this is one of those topics where, okay, yes, maybe it's a little touchy-feely to some people, but this is something we really need to talk about and really need to delve into.
When you have discipline in your life, you make these small little sacrifices or changes. You make these micro habits in the present that are ultimately going to add up for a better life in the future. Discipline creates habits. Habits make routine. And routine becomes who you are on the daily. It becomes natural eventually. Let's take a simple habit of brushing your teeth. If you brush your teeth at the sink, most of the days that's how you were taught, but, you have kids that are running around and they distract you and maybe you forget. This could be you. This could be something that you never forget and you're like, oh, that's disgusting. But just as an example, well, what if you make the little change to, oh, I'm going to brush my teeth while I let my conditioner soak in my hair? Start combining these micro habits. Eventually it's, hey, I'm brushing my teeth 2-3 times a day. That can be applied to medicine. As we work in the field, we start getting lazy. Maybe we start taking, easy shortcut routes. Maybe, you break, a glass med vial and don't use a filter needle and you're like, tiny little piece of glass is fine, not saying that I've never done it, that you've never done it, all the rest of it, but maintaining good small habits will become second nature eventually. Discipline is one of the most important personality traits in every single person's life. It refers to, and it's personal. It refers to a set of rules and regulations which are to be followed while undergoing any task or activity. I mean, goodness, sports have rules and regulations all the time. I bet there are plenty of sports fans out there that are like, oh, that's against, NFL regulations. These things. Don't make fun of me. I was searching for words.
No, I make fun of sports people all the time. I appreciate professional athletes, but I don't understand the addiction. I mean, it's...
Well,
Anyway, I won't get
addictions,
off on that tangent.
yeah, I would say addictions and coping are a whole other story. Or not story, but conversation. But with the discipline, it's a way of life. It's being committed to being honest, hardworking, motivated, and encouraged. You encourage yourself, you encourage others, that kind of behavior and just, I guess, feeling, it's infectious almost. It spreads if everybody commit to it, even if it's just tiny little things here and there. I mean, to be honest, so many people plateau, and once they meet their minimum requirements, they say C's make degrees. What's the difference between an a med student with an A and a med student with a C? Oh, they're all doctors. It's like, but if we're being honest, there's still a slight difference. I mean, there's still a difference in commitment and discipline, but people will meet their minimum requirements and stop trying. When you have poor discipline to begin with, it will show in your continued treatment, care, continuing, education, and your behavior.
And another, I guess, more uncomfortable side effect of this is if you're not able to safely and healthily regulate your emotions, your risk of suicide goes up exponentially. Now, it's a very dark turn off of what we're just talking about, but I can't tell you how many people I've seen who they don't separate their emotions from this job. They don't regulate at all. And we get exposed to horrible things. There's no making okay what we see on a consistent basis. And I'm sorry I don't have a more recent study for you, but back in April 6th of 2021, the CDC published a study that said law enforcement and firefighters are more likely to die by suicide than in the line of duty. They also reported that EMS providers are 1.39 times more likely to die by suicide than the public. So we are significantly at greater risk of suicide because of what we see, because of what we are continually faced with every day. We need to take this discussion seriously, because you have to be able to process things effectively. We're exposed to horrible things. Each of us deals with it in different ways and have different needs to promote our mental well-being. But we can't just not deal with it. You can't just, go walk around and wear these calls on your sleeve all the time, because eventually it's going to wear at you. You're not going to be able to handle it. You're going to have nightmares. You're going to spiral out and either kill yourself or start hurting people, because you'll start making impulsive decisions based on fear, and it's not going to end well for anybody.
There is another side to this, but as a quick little thing to what you were saying about emotional regulation. Yes, you need to be able to, I don't want to say suck it up, but I mean, that kind of is what it is. You need to be able to regulate your emotions on the call, during the call, all the rest of it. It's what you do after the call and how you deal with it. More and more companies are starting to try to do these peer groups and be there for providers. And, it's kind of become a popular, hot pop topic to talk about mental health. But what are we really doing to support that mental health? Are we just talking about it, saying, hey, I'm here? Or are we actually following up with providers after a bad call? Something that we would love for the general public to understand is there are some services that are good, that after, a bad call, they'll take you out of service to give you a little bit of downtime, finish the report, talk about it, all the rest of it. But there are some companies that expect you to run a dead baby call, and then you turn around and you have to run that pedophile that's talking about liking little girls. That kind of emotional up and down and trauma and all the rest of it wears on people. Now, I will share, because I don't shy away from it. I own it. I have complex PTSD. I've had it for literal years, and I got it not related to this field. I actually had the diagnoses and treatment and everything else before I started in EMS. And the person who I had shared in the leadership episode that told me I would never make it in this field, all the rest of it, part of his underlying reason was I had PTSD. And he said it would never serve me well. Now, on the flip side, at least for me, having PTSD coming to this field, I think has assisted in desensitizing me to a lot of situations. So I haven't gotten traumatized from the job. But that in itself is still not good. I mean, Daniel can attest, I still struggle with nightmares and, emotions and insomnia is a big one. And it's how you deal with it. It's how you deal with it. And I strongly believe no matter what your mental health is coming into this field, during the field, good or bad calls, whether you're a white cloud or a black cloud, therapy is super important and you need to have people that you can talk to. You need good, healthy coping mechanisms. Now, I am super passionate about this. I think so much needs to be addressed. We are going to have an entire month themed towards mental health and all the rest of it, so I won't go too far down the soapbox with this one. But if you're unable to manage the trauma and it is running you, you do need to decide if it's necessary for you to go ahead and do something different. Because PTSD and bad mental health and calls and everything will affect your ability to regulate your emotions. And it hurts the entire EMS and public service community when somebody kills himself because they cannot handle the bad memories and images and things that we hear. Not everybody has a good service that is going to protect them, or not protect them. I mean, they can't protect them from a call, but give them time after a call. I mean, just a few months ago, it was technically an interfacility. Mom had birthed the baby at home. Baby was dead. But because the baby was before viability, even though it was a whole baby with fingers and toes and everything, Mom needed higher level care. So we transported Mom. But because the coroner didn't need to do anything, an autopsy with the baby, because the baby wasn't of a viability, I had to transport a dead baby. And, I chose to do it, but by helping the facility staff that had never done this before, because, I've worked L&D and stuff before, wrapping up a dead baby that hadn't even had a chance to live yet, it affects people. I mean, just adding that up wears on people.
And I mean, that was a call when I first heard that she was running that call. I'm pretty stoic when it comes to the kinds of calls we run and the kind of shit that we see. There's really nothing that comes home with me. It doesn't bother me. There's no flinching about anything. That made my stomach drop. Just thinking about what it would be like if I were a parent in that situation and being exposed to, my dead child being transported with me in an ambulance. I couldn't even begin to deal with that. But even as a healthcare professional looking at that, realizing, holy shit, that's some heavy shit. That's heavy. Even if you can step back and say, all right, I'm good. I'm fine. It's work. That's still some heavy shit, y'all. And some people are built to carry those burdens because it's a burden. You see that, you run that kind of call, and we all have calls that we can point back to and say that was a life-changing event. Even if we can carry those burdens, they're still burdens. That's still stuff that the average human being doesn't have to see and isn't equipped to see. So if at the end of the day you need to get out of this field because you're not able to regulate those emotions, that's the best thing for you to do. That's not being mean or cold-hearted or cynical. You need to go. You're only going to hurt yourself, those around you, future patients. So I know we've kind of been all over the place in this topic of clinical discipline. And I'm sorry I don't have like a 3-point takeaway like we had from the first episode. But we really wanted to delve into this topic of emotional regulation for this field, being able to have some level of discipline, realizing that yes, you can have emotions. You should have emotions. If you're at the point where you don't have any emotions at all for anything, period, you need some therapy, bro. Period. Because that's not good. It's okay to not strongly react to this field, to the stuff you see. But when you have just completely shut down from everything, that is a problem. So we really want the takeaway from this to be, yes, don't be a dick on calls. I mean, sometimes you need to be, and that can be fun, and that's fine. But make sure that you are doing what is clinically appropriate for all of your patients, regardless of your emotional state. And with that, there's a little heavy note to end on. We appreciate you guys. Thank you for listening. If you found any value from this, we ask that you share it with your friends. Leave us a review. I'm sorry that as of right now, Apple still has not released the show. We're working on that. There's nothing wrong. They're just taking forever to do it. So all of you who are diehard Apple fans and won't listen to any other podcast platform, I'm sorry. We're getting to it. Hang on just a little bit longer. We appreciate you guys listening. If you got any questions, concerns, anything that you want to address with us, please message us. We're happy to talk. We want to engage with you. This is not us preaching like we're perfect. This is things that we're passionate about, and we want to see change in this field. You have anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. We are passionate about these topics. I am definitely passionate about. Oh,
that is the combining words verbal stroke right there.
Passionate.
Race score is still 0. We're good.
About these topics, continuing education. I mean, I cannot wait to talk more about the mental health because it is so important. There are some providers that may have the idea of, I feel nothing on these calls and I'm not lashing out. But I guarantee you, and this is something Daniel and I have discovered about ourselves, if you track it back, there is going to be something, whether it's, you may not be irrational or something like that, but you probably have an unhealthy coping mechanism. It's not normal to feel nothing.
And with that, thank you guys for listening. Share it with your friends. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
The Paramedic AF show is property of the EMS 2.0 project. The beliefs, opinions, and practices discussed in the show are our own and do not represent our respective employers. Please follow your local protocols, policies, and procedures at all times. All listeners are encouraged to research and self-educate regarding all content represented in this show. For more information regarding EMS 2.0, please visit our Facebook page for our website and social media links. Thank you for your continued support, and we look forward to you joining us next time.